Hi, Paul Arnold here, sometimes known as Stuttering Professor, and today I want to talk about the power of decision making. And if you think about it, you right now are the total sum of every decision you made in the past. The courses you did at school, what further education you did, the jobs you did, who you went out with, where you chose to live, the food, the sports, etc. All those have led you to be where you are right now. So clearly, the better the quality decisions we make, the better the quality of the outputs we get. And the same applies for organisations. Every organisation is moving ahead based upon the multitude of decisions it's making every single day. And I think actually when you look at your career inside an organisation, very much is dictated by your quality of decision making. The more powerful you are, the more effective you are in decision making, the more likely you'll get promoted. And the reality is, the more you get promoted, the bigger the quality of decisions you have to go and take. And therefore, a lot of today is talking about how do you make those quality decisions. And what I've noticed is that, the people who are really successful decision makers have a lot of self-belief, a lot of confidence, and a lot of courage. And there are like small decision makers in the company and the big decision makers in the company. The big decision makers are the one who, metaphorically, if the wheel is spinning, they have the courage to stop the wheel and spin it the other way. And you see many small decision makers who never really stop the wheel and allow it to go and make minor little amendments. You've got to have courage in your decision making. And certainly in my past experience as a manager is that I often knew when someone was ready for promotion, because when they come in to talk to me about an issue, I say, well, what do you think is the solution to this? And they'll tell me something, and more often than not, they'd say something, say, well, let me just think about whether that's exactly right. Let's look at the consequences. And I think, they haven't quite got it yet. And other people come in and they suggest something, and say, yeah, that makes sense. And you've got to know whether they're right for promotion based upon the quality of decision making they would go and put in front of you. Now, Cornell University did a piece of research, goodness knows how they came up with this number, that we make about 35,000 decisions every single day. Obviously, a lot of them unconsciously, but the reality is that we are all really bad decision makers. So how can we get to make better decisions? Well, I want to just share with you, four basic sort of principles on which we got to make decisions. They are what, who, how, and when. So let's look at each one of those in turn. The what. The first thing is we've really got to focus our attention and our effort on the important decisions, and frankly the smaller ones, stop worrying about them. Any decision is going to be okay. I always think it's quite amusing how Steve Jobs always used to wear black, and he said, because I don't want to waste my effort and my energy on small decisions about what I should wear. And in many ways it may be a bit sort of egotistical, but at the same time I think that he had a point there. So don't agonize over what you're going to have in a restaurant. Frankly, all the food's going to be okay. There's very little negative consequence of anything you're going to really choose. So focus on the important decision. And also when you do that, be very clear what is the decision you're going to make. Because very often we can get sidetracked. So in other words, the decision is what's best for this company, not how do we manage, the sensitivity that Pete's going to feel about not getting that job. That becomes an irrelevant issue, and we've got to keep the end in mind. Then who? And I think all too often organisations allow decision making to be pushed up the line because everyone's so scared of making a decision. We've got to start to push decision making down. And as much as I said before about knowing when people are right to promote, I think actually the only way you get to know how to do a good decisions is through experience. And the only way you get to have experience is by having a go at doing it. And sure, some of them won't be well done, but you know what? We need to give people the chance to push it down to the right level. And actually on that point, one of the big issues we're facing is this multitude of people involved in decision making. And often we all know that just creates a really bad quality of decision, because we are sub-optimizing all the time. So in many ways, where possible, we want to reduce the number of people who are actually involved in the final decision ultimately to one person. That's where the RACI model comes in. We will go and consult with lots of people, but one person has to make a decision. And I used to work with a very good GM once called Tim, and he was really good at that. He would consult, he would listen, he'd listen, and then he'd say, right, okay, I've decided this is what I'm going to do. And I thought that was really good, and I thought, you couldn't have the debate afterwards. He said, no, I've decided, end of, and I think that's what we've got to go and do. So now I want to talk about the how. And the first thing we've got to do is define what the problem is, because only by defining the problem can we work out how to solve it. And you've got to understand the underlying issues that are causing what's going on. And I always talk about finding the right angle of the truth. So, in much as like this remote controller's got that truth, it's got that truth, it's got that truth, it's got that truth. So what we've got to do is examine the issue from multiple points to actually get a fuller idea of what we're trying to do. And then once you've done that, you've got to simplify down to the key issues. And why? Because otherwise you get so easily distracted with too many other factors which only complicate your decision makers. So focus only on what is important. And then what you then got to do is actually work out what is the information you need to have to make your decision. And I think you've got to focus on what's the minimum amount of information that you want to have rather than the maximum. Because the reality is you never, ever, ever have all the information that you want to have. And then actually you need to decide what are the key criteria. And don't get sidetracked. Less is absolutely more. And then define some options. And again, you want 3 or 4 options, not 33, because that's just going to confuse the hell out of you. And actually, you've got to beware of the factors that can unconsciously influence you in the wrong way. And there's lots of unconscious bias we talk about. The power of loss. We fear losing something more, and we value a loss at twice the level of a gain. Sunk costs. If we put a lot of effort into something, we don't really want to walk away from it. Then we have other factors like sort of preference for the status quo. We're more likely to want to just keep going with what we've been doing rather than stop it and change it. Then there's peer pressure. What are other people doing? What is the rest of people suggesting we can do? Can actually sometimes be a mistake. And we have overconfidence, our belief that we really can make that happen. And then we have anchoring. Sometimes something happens, there's something that sort of forces us to overweigh what the importance of that, be it some ego thing or something else which actually overweights our information and pushes us towards that thing. And we tend to see what we believe rather than actually sort of believe what we see, by which I mean we've already got it in mind roughly what we want to do, and we seek information to support that rather than necessarily being open to all the information. And I think you've got to remember that there's never the right way to do the wrong thing. So, actually we've got to be very careful we don't just sort of second guess what the boss wants or second guess other people, because actually that's not, we've got to say, what is the thing we've got to do? Keep the end in mind. Now let's look at the when. Look, agility and speed of decision making is increasing a competitive edge, and actually, we always say, well, what if I make the wrong decision if I sort of make it far too fast? Well, look, I think the truth is, you've always got to remember, a decision is not for life. And actually what we do is we need to take the principles from lean startup. And what we do is we test fast. And we potentially fail fast. But what we can then do is we can then pivot or we scale. So in other words, we make a decision, we put it out there, we test it often in a safe place, and actually we can then very quickly read what the results are, and then we can change our minds or keep with that decision. So don't be too worried about that. And I think, it's like take the right amount of time. For a small decision, frankly, make it very quickly. For really big important ones with major consequences, I think you've got to buy the proper amount of time. It's the Goldilocks principle. Not too little amount of time, not too much amount of time. And we've got to make sure that we give it the proper amount of time appropriate for the decision we're making. And I often think we should sleep on it. We shouldn't discount the massive ability of our unconscious brain in making sense of the complexity and, of decision making. And sometimes when we've slept upon it, the right answer just bubbles up and we know what we should be doing. So I think actually sleeping on something is not a bad idea. And like I say, you can't wait forever for all the information, as decision making is always contextualized and it's always time bound. General Norman Schwarzkopf, who was sort of the commander after Desert Storm, always used to say that he never had enough information and actually he had to make the best choice he could with only 50% of information. Well, if he's making decisions that are affecting lives, frankly, when we're just making decisions about widgets or something like that, we've got to accept that we never get all the information that we really want to have. So often, a suboptimal decision made now is much better than an optimized decision in a month's time. And therefore you've got to be, behavioral economics talks about these people who are satisficers and people who are optimizers. And frankly, what an optimizer does is they want to get everything exactly right. And a satisficer is like, based on what the outcome of this is okay. This is the best quality decision I can make at this point in time. And sometimes optimizers are not the best people to be put in places where we need to make fast decisions. So let's just remind ourselves about some of the other key principles and things that we need to think about when we're making decisions. The first is, there is very, very rarely one perfect decision. Every decision has both positive, negative, and also unexpected consequences of it. And actually, there's often like more than one road that takes you to Rome. So therefore there are often quite a few ways which, as long as you commit it to it, you're going to make a success of that, Which brings me on to the next thing, should we be Spock-like and rational or should we be emotional? And I think, there's a bit of both. We've got to remember that the System 1 brain, is much bigger computer and actually is often working with emotions and things like that, and it's much able to compute very complex things. So I often think that we should actually have a gut reaction to something, but then what we then do is we then use a System 2 brain to rationalize it, make sense of it, and just double check that we're doing the right thing about that. And then, I think that, the other thing about it is, when we're talking about emotions, I think it means we've got to free ourselves from the negative emotions that surround us. Like, oh my God, what if it all goes wrong? Da, 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 da. And there are two suggestions you do with this. Number one is take yourself out of the equation. Imagine for a second that you are a consultant with another organization. What would you recommend for them? And sometimes we need to be clear of that to say, well, the best thing they should do. And the other thing is to future pace. So in other words, think, what is the best decision for 5 years' time? Okay, it may be all messy and horrible now, but in 5 years' time, that has got to be the best thing. So we've got to be doing that. And the final thing is execution is everything. It's easy to make a decision. It's bloody difficult to make it take place in reality because lots of other politics comes into place. And I think we have to follow the rules laid out in the book called Obliquity, is this idea that, sometimes we've got to weave and we've got to duck and dive and we've got to tack our way through. And sometimes we have to go left a bit to go right, etc. And I think that's the reality. So sometimes we have to take slightly suboptimal decisions to get us to a better place before we move on. Anyway, I hope that's useful. It's a very large topic and I do workshops in this area, and so happy to help if I can be of use. My details are at the end of this video, and good decision making. Ciao.